I want to welcome everyone to the NYU Langone Medical Center. My name is Lesley Visser. I'm the Chief of Sports Medicine here. So, in putting this thing together, this is one of the great things about my job, is that we get to collaborate with other divisions within the university. And certainly you think we would do this more often, but when these opportunities come along, they're great. So this is a great collaboration between the Medical Center, the Tisch Center down at the main NYU campus, Arthur Miller representing the School of Law, and the Musculoskeletal Rehab Network here at NYU Langone Medical Center, and the Division of Sports Medicine, where you get to meet a lot of the sports medicine physicians here at the university. But really, this was a thought, and someone came up to me, and that someone was Dino Mangiero, and she's here in the audience. She's not up here on the panel, but she came up to me with an idea that concussion and the management of concussions is sort of a big black box in sports medicine, and it just happened to be a big black box in how it's managed ethically. It's also how it's managed from a sports perspective, and also from a law perspective as well. So all these issues sort of came together, and the thought of a panel, and the initial thought was, well, maybe we'll put something together and try to get some collaboration between the different divisions here at the hospital, get all the other aspects of the university involved, and that's where it started. And it's amazing the tremendous feedback that we got from all the different people. We just asked them to be involved in this topic about concussion management, and they dropped everything that they were doing. If they had something else planned, they said, you know what, I'm going to come to this because it's important. And so special thanks, in addition to Dino Mangiero, was Bob Boland, who you'll meet later on, who really pushed this effort forward, and Lee Eagle, who also was a main driver, and you'll get to meet him as well. But more importantly, this thing's not going to happen if you don't get a commitment from the Dean of the Tisch Center. And the Dean of the Tisch Center, you'll get to meet him as well, as Bjorn Hansen. And without that commitment, this doesn't come cheap, this doesn't come easy. So he really thought this was an important endeavor. So we decided to put it together. So hopefully this thing will be nice. And I'll leave you with this last comment. 10 years ago, when I was training as a resident, we had an individual who was the star of the football team. And as a resident, he was a concussed individual. And I saw the interplay between the parents, the coaches, the trainers, and the doctors. And it was almost this big mess and confusion about what to do with this athlete. And at that point, I learned nothing during that time 10 years ago. And certainly we've come a long way, and hopefully this panel will enlighten you about some of the challenges in dealing with these concussed athletes. So Bjorn, I'd like to introduce Bjorn to say a few words as well.
Well, let me add my welcome on behalf of the students, the full-time adjunct faculty, and the staff of the Preston Robert Tisch Center for Hospitality, Tourism, and Sports Management. I got that out in one breath. I thought that was pretty good. I also wanted to thank you on behalf of the entire School of Continuing Professional Studies community. Arthur Miller is a shared faculty member. He's part-time on the law school and part-time member of our school, and we are just honored to have him available to moderate these kinds of events. I'd also like to offer a special welcome to the Friends of the Tisch Center, which is our advisory board, to our alumni, and we've invited some of the leading coaches from regional high schools to join us here tonight as well, so a special welcome to them. This is the first time we've had a public dialogue with the medical school, the Langone Center, and it's just been a great planning experience. I'd like to thank everyone, without mentioning names because I'd leave too many out, for really successful preparation for tonight. We'll see how successful tonight is. We do have, once or twice a year, public dialogues with Arthur Miller. And there's a great little write-up about Arthur in the program. I hope you look at it. But let me just mention a few things about Arthur. His title, he has a great title. It's better than Dean or these other titles we have, but it's NYU Professor of Public Dialogue. He has served on the law faculty of Harvard, Minnesota, and Michigan. He's had careers in not only academia, but also in law, in television, and as an author. And he has a great special title. You probably have never met anyone who is a commander to the Order of the British Empire. He was appointed by Queen Elizabeth. So please welcome tonight's moderator, legal scholar, intellectual, luminary and bona fide celebrity, Arthur Miller.
Thank you, Bjorn. I don't know about anybody else, but I've had a dialogue with the medical school many times. Of course, I was lying in a bed upstairs at the time. I'm delighted to be here on what I hope will be a very stimulating discussion. So let's, at least for 2 hours, let's drop Penn State. In 2011, there's no more relevant topic in sports than head injuries. It's a critical problem. Whether you talk about a high school football player here in New York State, who earlier this fall died, or you talk about a man who some think is the signature for the National Hockey League, Sidney Crosby. And remember, he hasn't returned to action after suffering the effects of a series of concussions. And that was last season, and he's still out. Head injuries represent a very, very significant threat to all contact sports and their future. Whether it's football or hockey, the two most obvious, lacrosse, wrestling, they're all threatened. And in this academic audience, many of you probably don't think about boxing. Boxing today isn't what boxing used to be. Boxing is at best a second-tier sport. And a lot of people think that in part is because of the image of the punch-drunk fighter is just a little too much to bear. Even baseball or soccer, basketball, they're all contact sports at a different level. And they've all experienced players who aren't playing for considerable periods of time. You can't pick up the paper, for those of you who still read papers, without finding an article about a head injury. Today's New York Times had one involving a hit on a goalie in the National Hockey League. Every day, every day. It's a problem that goes from the professional ranks all the way down to the youth. All of them play contact sports. All of them are vulnerable to head injuries. So in a sense, it's a sustainability issue for these sports. Ask yourself, what happens to the games we love when those games hurt the people we love to watch? Sidney Crosby, for an example. And how long is it going to be before someone on Capitol Hill thinks this would be a great subject to have hearings on and propose legislation? So that's our topic tonight. We're going to try and gain some understanding into why there's a crisis, a controversy about caring, because that's what it is. We care. Head injuries, not easy to define or assess or assign responsibility. And it may well be that the issue is even harder to solve. Now, you have in front of you 14 people. It's a wondrous group. If I had my druthers, I'd say, let's end the evening. I just want to collect autographs. But we can't do that. You have information about each and every one of them, but so that you and the audience can see them and get a sense of their role in our discussion, I've asked each of them to introduce himself or herself with a sentence or two, nothing more. Who the hell are you?
I'm Bob Boland. I'm the academic chair at the Preston Robert Tisch Center, and for more than a decade, I represented professional athletes in a variety of sports.
What we used to call an agent. You were an agent.
We won't say what we call them now.
That's right.
Good point. Good point.
I'm Art Caplan. I run the Center for Bioethics at the University of Pennsylvania. I played football and lacrosse at Brandeis University, where we didn't win often, but we had intense and lengthy discussions about why not.
And Arthur loves pastrami sandwiches.
This is true.
Dennis Cardone, a physician in the Department of Orthopaedic Surgery here at NYU Langone, and I'm a primary care sports medicine physician and a co-director of the Partners for Youth program.
Harry Carson, former New York Giant, member of the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
And someone who gave me enormous pleasure in my youth. I'm still a loyal Giant. I said, Roy, I said, forget Penn State, for heaven's sakes. Andrew?
Dr. Andrew Feldman, clinical professor of orthopedic surgery and sports medicine, team physician, New York Rangers, and future Hall of Famer. I don't know what for, but never know.
Ah, the modesty of doctors.
Dr. Steve Flanagan, Chair of Rehabilitation Medicine. I provide medical treatment, rehabilitation treatment to folks with brain injury of all severities.
I'm Roy S. Johnson, a columnist with ESPN.com, former editor-in-chief at Men's Fitness Magazine, and the owner of a corporate wellness consulting firm. You can follow my sports tweets at RSJ and my fitness and nutrition tweets at FitLiveWin, and I do expect to have at least about 300 new followers before the end of the night.
Could we have a telephone number too?
Twitter is all that matters.
Sorry, I'm an old fogey. Claudette?
I'm Dr. Claudette Lajam. I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I am involved with adult reconstruction, hip and knee replacements, as well as sports medicine. I'm an assistant professor of orthopedics at the NYU Hospital for Joint Diseases. I'm also an avid cyclist, and I take care of USA cycling athletes, and I take part in the medicine of cycling programs across the country.
Very good, Doc. Hi, Dino Mangiero, head football coach, Poly Prep Country Day School in Brooklyn, New York. I played 6 seasons in the NFL.
Chris Nowinski, former Harvard football player, the only Harvard graduate in history to join WWE, which you can take any way you want. Retired from post-concussion syndrome, opened up my eyes to the concussion crisis, wrote a book about it, started some organizations focused on advocacy, education, enabling research. Enabling research means that I've asked no fewer than 2 panelists here to donate their brains when they pass away at some point.
God, that's morbid. What did you play for the Harvard football team?
Defensive tackle.
Defensive tackle. You don't look like a Harvard man.
Body slam him.
Ted?
Actually, it would be the honor roll was my finisher.
Ted Shaker. I've worked in the media business and sports and news for 3 decades, and I'm now a member of the adjunct faculty here at NYU.
And I always ask Ted this question, and I hope he gives me the same answer. How many Emmys do you have?
How many do you have?
2.
We have 15 between us.
That's the only time I let him get the better hand.
I'm Brendan Shanahan. I played 21 years in the National Hockey League. I retired 2 years ago. I just started a month and a half ago. I'm heading the new Department of Player Safety for the National Hockey League. We deal with the safety of the playing environment, equipment, and also league discipline.
I'm Gerard Varlotta. I'm in the Department of Rehab Medicine and Orthopedics, associate professor here at NYU. I'm a ringside boxing physician, and this is my 48th year of playing ice hockey.
Hi, I'm Lesley Visser. I'm a sportscaster at CBS, and I started my career at the Boston Globe, where they made me the first woman to cover the NFL back in 1975. So I've pretty much covered the careers of all you guys here, and I will tell you that while I was at the Globe, I went over and sat in on a couple of Professor Miller's classes. So tonight I'm either very honored or very terrified.
That's our group. That's our group. Now, I've asked the group for us all to go into a hypothetical world. A world, we don't know where it is, but it is. It's a world we know. And I've asked them to be in that world for a while as we discuss some of the issues before us. Understand that everything that happens from this point on is unrehearsed, it's spontaneous, haven't a clue what I'm going to get. I just told them to have some fun with a difficult subject. There will be time for Q&A toward the end, so you will have your opportunity. Here's my little world. We're in a good-sized city in the United States, and it has an NHL hockey team. It's a very, very special hockey team because it's now fighting for the Stanley Cup. And I happen to be its star.
This is very hypothetical.
Right. Now, there's a problem, at least I have a problem. Tomorrow is the 7th game of the Stanley Cup. It's 3-3. In the 6th game, in the middle of the 2nd period, I was knocked out on ice. So now the question for me and others is, do I play in the 7th game? Now, maybe I've had a concussion. Somebody has suggested that I have a grade 1 concussion. Steve, what's that?
Well, if you're talking about the American Academy of Neurology, that means you...
I do it all the time.
Okay, there you go.
Speak of nothing else, Steve.
That's why you're a professor. So no loss of consciousness, and your symptoms lasted less than 15 minutes.
What kind of symptoms?
Could be anything. Could be confusion.
I thought you said you were knocked out.
Oh. Knocked down. I was flat on the ice.
I thought you said out. Out or down? Were you knocked unconscious?
Hey, Roy. Don't fight the hypothetical, as we say in law school. I was knocked flat. Knocked flat.
Flat.
Okay, because actually if you lost consciousness, then it's a grade 3.
Then it's a grade 3 if I was unconscious.
Unconscious.
Okay, let's say I was not unconscious. What am I likely experiencing?
Could be a whole host of things. Difficulty remembering. You may not remember what game you're in, what period you're in. You could feel dizzy, confused, vision can be off. Whole host of symptoms you could be having.
Is this serious?
You bet.
You've got the look. That's what they get.
The look.
Yeah. Undescribable, but once you see it, you'll never forget it.
The look.
Terrified. But they don't emote terror. They're disoriented.
I'm up and around. I'm practicing today.
Doesn't mean you know what you're doing. Not at all. And that's part of the problem.
Yeah, well, you know, I don't mean to be too egotistical about this. But even when I'm not at full strength, I'm pretty damn good.
Has this happened to you before?
Is that relevant, Steve?
You bet it is. Not only did it happen before, but how recently did it happen?
And if I said, no, this is the first time,
I would bet that's not true.
you're calling me a liar.
No.
Why would I lie?
You may not even know what a concussion is. You
take a dim view of your patients, don't you?
Well, a lot of them simply don't know when they've had a concussion. You got to ask the right questions. Did you ever get dinged before? No,
dinged? Is that a medical term? Isn't that what happens to your car when it's parked? You get dinged?
That's right. Sure it is. So, if you ask your patients, if you ask an athlete, you ever had a concussion before? Never. This was my first one. You ever got the wind knocked out of you, or felt dinged, got your bell rung? Oh yeah, lots of times.
Have you seen colors? That's
They've had concussions before. You have to know how to ask the questions.
Andrew, you're the team physician.
I knew this was coming to me.
Should I play tomorrow?
There's a lot of factors here. Firstly, it's extremely important to know the players. You have 25 guys on the team. You're going to pretty much know their history, and you're going to know if they've been concussed during your tenure. You're just going to know. Number two, you're going to figure out who the player is. And there are Sidney Crosbys, and there are guys who are muckers, and there are guys who, you brush them on the sleeve and they get knocked out, and other guys don't tell you when they got knocked out, even though they have the same contact. So you have to know the player. The situation is very important. 7th game of the Stanley Cup. Get back on the ice. That's the usual thing. But
I'd be crazy not to want to play.
It's not a matter of you wanting to play. It's what is morally, ethically, and medically acceptable. And herein lies the rub, because we don't really have criteria for this, and that is the basic problem with concussion workup. So let's give a scenario, kind of like yours, but I'm going to be more specific. A guy's flat out on the ice. He hasn't lost consciousness. He skates off on his own. Nobody helps him off. Put him in the quiet room, which is what Brendan tells us we should do, correct, for 15 minutes. And we look at him. We give him a SCAT-2, which is the concussion protocol. And he doesn't score too badly. But he's been concussed. He may not have actually, by criteria, been concussed. But he has that look, and he has some of those weird findings. And that's a big gray area. Because in a certain circumstance, you might not play the guy. In another circumstance, you might be morally and ethically okay to play him.
Now, what's your power on this question?
Unequivocal. Because in my job, and the reason I took this job is because I was given unequivocal power by the general manager when I signed the contract. I can't be swayed by any coach or any family member or any agent or any player. And even though potentially it may get me into some hot water, and it has.
With whom?
With all those people I just mentioned. It doesn't matter, because as far as I'm concerned, it's player safety first. And actually, in the long run, you build a legacy on that. If you're short-sighted in how you make decisions, you're going to end up being there for a short time.
This is the 7th game of the Stanley Cup.
And Doc,
Correct.
that's a great answer but I'm at a press conference and I'm on deadline. So should he play, and will he play tomorrow, based on what you know?
I'm going to hold you off as long as possible. You're going to misinterpret it no matter what I say, so it doesn't matter.
Yes or no? I'm pretty good at interpreting those.
The mutual respect is enormous up here. Now, Lesley, you were covering the game. You saw me get knocked flat. You saw me get up. You saw me move off on my own steam. You've been around sports for a while, we'll say. What's your story? Is there a story here?
Players lie. Brendan, feel free to confirm this. As Andy mentioned, that they will tell you they are fine. I was covering the 1993 NFC Championship, a rare time that Harry Carson and his Giants weren't in it. It was the Dallas Cowboys against the 49ers. And Dana Stubblefield hit Troy Aikman in the head, and I was behind the bench, and the team doctors went over, and they said, Troy, where are you? And Troy said, I can go back in, I'm fine, I'm fine. They said, Troy, where are you? He said, I'm in Henrietta. Henrietta was his high school in Oklahoma. Now, that was, maybe you could speak to it, some of the doctors, that was enough information that he didn't play again. And eventually he had 10 concussions in his career and retired, still gets migraines.
So what's the operating principle for the journalist? Never believe a player? Do you believe a team doctor?
Cut the cards. Cut the cards. Believe, but cut the cards. It's the team doctor has his interest. I mean, everybody's got an aspect of self-interest.
Really?
I know, surprising.
Gee,
Even
I know
the
this
networks.
is a hypothetical world. I thought everybody was true blue and honest.
It is a great concern. I have seen in my almost 40 years of covering sports, the media awareness has changed, as has the medical awareness. So that was almost 20 years ago with Troy. I was there for the game that Steve Young played his last game. Aeneas Williams hit him on the third Monday night game of 1999. That was the end of Steve's career because the doctors and Steve Mariucci, the coach, said, we are not going to put you back in. Now, I mean, Chris, you could speak to it. It's much greater awareness now.
Oh, overwhelmingly. Thank you. I'll answer. I think there are very, very few situations, and people might be surprised to hear me say this, that you could go back. And I'll work backwards on this. If you're under 18 years old, no way, no how are you ever considered returning after concussion. But let's imagine that adults are allowed to do dangerous jobs in this country.
It's a free country.
Especially when they know the risks.
It's a free country.
The problem up to now is that no athletes have ever been educated on this, so they never knew what they were trading to lie about their concussion or to not speak up when they had it. Nowadays, hopefully they do, although it's very recent, because I would guess that Sidney Crosby did not appreciate what happened to him the first time he was hit in January, where he should have spoken up and shouldn't have been on the ice for the second one. I think that was a missed educational opportunity in the fact that he was playing hockey for almost 20 years and no one ever told him, hey, when you have symptoms, you go back out there, you're at risk. However, if you're 30 years old or 35, or in Brendan's case, you played till you're 40, something, and it's the last 40. And it's probably the last game of your career. If someone told you you might be dealing with a year or two of post-concussion syndrome if you get whacked again, or you might be selling some years of quality of life down the road to chronic traumatic encephalopathy, and you still wanted to play, if someone told you you're trading 5 years of your life and you said yes, maybe you can do that.
It's a free country.
Right. If you're 21, I would say the team would never want you to play.
Come on, how many times am I going to get the opportunity to play in the 7th game of the Stanley Cup?
I mean, yeah, I only got to do the Royal Rumble one time, and I missed it.
You know, I agree with Chris. I think that, you know, we can talk about experiences from 10, 20, 30 years ago. They're not entirely accurate. And even sometimes the people who love us the most, our parents, will say, well, this is how I did it when I was in high school. The fact is it's an evolving science. Players are smarter now than ever. They understand the investment in their lives and in their bodies and in their minds. What players know now is much, much greater than what they knew 5 years ago. So I think that having been in a dressing room just 2 years ago, I can say this, that all those expressions we used to use, not because we were lying, but simply because we weren't aware, as Chris said, I got dinged. Now there's a greater awareness that I've been concussed. And there's all this peer pressure for athletes, I can speak for hockey, to play hurt. But there's a distinct difference between playing hurt and playing injured. If it's just about playing with some pain, there's certainly that peer pressure to still do that. But I can tell you right now that players in the NHL, and Sidney Crosby is a great example, and something greater can come out of Sidney's experience and the thoughtfulness in which he's made his comeback, and he's close to one. It's about a greater education and the importance now, and I can really assure you that the peer pressure in a dressing room nowadays it's always still, you know, whether it's a cut or a nick or a bruise or a bump or a shoulder, you know what, do it for the team. But when it's your head, the peer pressure is to get off the ice, and the peer pressure is to take care of you.
Let me try something with you, and I realize this is a little difficult because in a way you are schizoid. You had a life as a player, and now you have a life as the head of safety. Let me take you back to your playing days. Let me take you back 5 years. 6 years, how many years? And let's assume that we're on the same line. You're my wingman. And that the two of us, when on ice, we are in combination the highest scoring line in the NHL. And neither of us has ever won the Stanley Cup. And you're my friend, you're my buddy, we're like brothers. And I come to you and I say, I really want to play the 7th game with you. I want to do this together. 5 years ago, what would you say to me?
Five years ago, that's a great amount of time to put on this. 5 years ago, I probably would have said to my line mate, thanks for helping me get here, but we're not going to be any good with you. And we're actually, even though you're a great player and a great line mate, let us do this for you. 10 years ago, I don't know if that would have been said. I would say this year, last year, what we've learned now, it would definitely be said. Now, I can't speak for everybody. I'm not going to be so pompous as to say that this is going to be the view of every single player in the NHL.
Do you respect my free will?
Wait a second, am I hurt or are you hurt?
I'm hurt.
You're hurt. Yeah, I respect
And
your
I
free will.
want to play. And I want to play with you because we've done so well together. And you know that at half speed, I'm pretty damn good. There's no one else on our team who will be as good as me with you tomorrow night. And
see,
I want to play.
I think you're wrong right there. I disagree. You may think you are. I have been in this situation. When I was 38 years old and playing for the New York Rangers, I collided with an ex-teammate of mine who played for Philadelphia, and I was knocked out cold for 3 minutes on the ice. It was the only time in my career I was knocked out cold. As a matter of fact, it was the only time in my career a trainer had to actually come on the ice to help me off the ice. I'd always managed to get up and get off on my own.
I was on vacation that day.
Yeah, Doc was skiing somewhere.
I'm not touching that line. but we've already heard that's a grade 3 at least.
But what I'm saying is, well, I knew I wasn't ready to play 2 days later. I had vertigo, I had memory loss. But I will say this, even when I was trying to make my comeback, and Sidney Crosby was describing this recently, and I thought it was a really great way to put it. You feel a step behind yourself. You feel like the world is no longer in high def, and you're used to high def. I just think that the people surrounding us now, there are still the old school guys saying, get in there, but the people who are learning more and knowing more are becoming more powerful, in my mind.
Say, Boland, you're my agent. I want to play tomorrow night. And nothing that went on during practice today suggests I'd be a liability to the team. I want to play tomorrow. And I'm getting flack. Team doctor. Even my buddy Brendan is selling out.
He's gone soft over the years, I
He's
suspect.
gotten soft, obviously.
Hey, broken
You're
leg,
my agent.
broken leg play. Broken leg play. Broken head don't.
I want you to play depending on your contract status. If you're in the first year of a long-term deal and it's a guaranteed deal, by all means, we think, and if there's any danger to you, you should sit out. If you're in a contract year and you're coming up for a contract, and this is game 7, and you can make a lot more money, even though I told you when I was recruiting you that I care about you as a person, I really care about you as a contract far more. So there's a good chance that I'm going to want you to play as badly as the team would want you to play, and that's probably my perception. So I probably did something a little earlier about this. I probably sent you to a second opinion doctor. I probably got to, when you first got hurt in the season, when you were first dinged or first nicked, I probably sent you to another doctor who isn't your team doctor.
You mean other than Andy?
Yeah, I don't dislike the team doctor. I don't think there's any question of their competence and ethics, but the phrase team doctor really stands out to me. That means they're an agent of the team, and in New York State, And they can't even commit malpractice against you because they're covered under workers' comp.
Can I ask a question? And actually, it's a comment that I'm going to say. He said he's spoken too much already, which I disagree with. He said, what if he goes out and plays in Game 7 and sucks?
And what?
Sucks.
I didn't say sucks. I said to play well.
Another
I said
technical
sucks.
term. Well, at least for me,
said
I want my
something far
client to suck.
smarter.
I want him out there.
But I mean,
wait a second.
what does that do to the negotiation?
Oh, I suppose this is a Russian roulette type situation. He is saying to me, if I'm in my last year of the contract and I don't play the 7th game, my negotiating position is impaired.
I can spin it that he took the ice against advice because he's a warrior. And they're going to write courageous stories about how hard he worked and what he risked. And that's what I'm looking at.
I'm Kurt Schilling. I'll even wear a bloody sock.
Forget whether
He didn't
sucks.
wear it. He cut
What if-
his.
What if he gets hurt? I mean, this is one game. You're telling me that if he is a free agent after this series, you're saying that his entire negotiating position will be affected by one game, and if he is hurt, now forget how well he plays.
Because I'm worried about what you're going to write about him if he sits out Game 7. Because you're going to hurt his value by writing that he isn't a gamer, that he's a coward.
I might write that he's smart because he doesn't want to eat oatmeal out of a straw for the rest of his life.
I got to put him on the ice.
But the only thing we haven't really talked about here is, his actual status. We haven't heard a physical exam. We don't know anything about his
We heard
cognitive
this
status.
long-winded answer from the
Well,
doctor
we
who
don't know.
wouldn't answer my question.
Yeah. What's your exam? Are you still having symptoms? I mean, there is the Zurich Convention of 2008. They had a consensus onto when you can return to play, and it's a graded return. But if you have no symptoms and you're symptom-free and you can practice and you can move stepwise through the steps, and you can actually play, there's no reason you can't play. But we don't have any of those data right now. We're just hearing, stories.
Andrew's
I want to throw a monkey wrench in because let's talk about the Sidney Crosby scenario, and I've seen the scenario 5, 6, 7 times. You get a guy and he gets his bell rung. He doesn't go out, but he's on Queer Street for a few minutes, which is what we call it, kind of in the locker room, and he passes every test with flying colors. Okay? Every test you give him, he passes. Now, here's the monkey wrench. I have seen, I will call it an evolving concussion. I don't know if there's a name for it. They don't have symptoms right away. They don't have symptoms for the 2 or 3 days later. The 7th game is tomorrow. They don't have symptoms. They get symptoms 3, 4, 5 weeks later. They get it over the summer. And they're not even doing anything over the summer. So the point that I'm trying to make is there is no typical concussion. Whatever kind of criteria the NHL, the NFL, or whoever is trying to make this standardized is wrong because they can pass these tests and still have serious issues.
Well, once you tell me that, it's my own game of Russian roulette.
Well, that is the point.
She can't tell me I'm safe. You can't tell me I'm unsafe. Screw you both.
But that's the problem.
I'll do what I want. As I occasionally say, it's a free country.
That is the problem.
And if Coach will play me, why don't I play? Who are you going to send me to? Which doctor?
I'm going to send you to Dr. Cardone because he's not associated with the team. He's the person I get information about you because remember, my business is to know more about your condition than anybody else, including the team doctor and probably you. So I'm going to have sent you to Dr. Cardone probably earlier in the season because it may be hard for me in Game 7 to get you away from your team. Your coach and your team doctor may not be getting me to you, but I want to send him to you earlier, so I want to have some information about where you're at.
And I want you to know you made a great choice. Oh, as always. This is it. Because Dr. Feldman, on this one, he's being just a little bit too conservative. Right now, you're asymptomatic. You got your bell rung yesterday. You're asymptomatic. I could throw every battery of test at you, including neuropsych testing, whatever. That doesn't even show that it has good reliability or sensitivity or whatever you want to say. And if you're out on that ice and you're practicing, and you remain asymptomatic, no symptoms whatsoever, then you absolutely could make an argument in an adult professional hockey player, certainly not in the high school adolescent, but in an adult to return to play.
2 words, Sidney Crosby, because that's exactly what happened to him.
Right,
he passed his test, he was concussed, and then he
Crosby.
went around the
but
back.
How many how long has NHL been around? 70, I don't know, 100 years, let's just say. How many players have had their bell rung, dinged, and have been back and have not been Sidney Crosby.
But there is a scenario that we've been discussing most of the evening about the star player and how come after a first concussion something wasn't done to prevent him from getting the second one that lasted 9 months.
You took him out of the game. He didn't play that game. That's absolute. We all know that. That's the guideline. But if the next day he comes into the office completely asymptomatic, he's fine. He feels good.
Tell me what asymptomatic is.
But that doesn't mean
we're
he's
trying to
still
split
at risk.
hairs here, and we're trying to define terms. And the problem is that, as I told you before, there are some typical concussions, and those are the ones where the protocol follows suit. There's a lot of stuff in the gray area, and it doesn't. And this is where we are right now.
But then what do? Do you just keep everybody out you have any suspicion of? I mean, every time someone gets knocked down, are you going to tell them that they can't play?
Claudette, I got an idea.
The answer is yes.
I respect the team doctor.
Are we talking about knocked down?
Sort of. I respect Dr. Cardone, who my agent sent me to. But my agent wants me to play. My agent wants me to negotiate my next contract. And by the way, there's an incentive clause in my contract that if the team wins the Stanley Cup, I get a boost. And we all know he's taking a cut out of every penny I earn. So I love him dearly on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. But you've been my doctor since I was a child. We'll ignore the age differential. Just ignore it, right? I'm coming to you on the QT, just you and me. What do you say?
Well, it's a difficult situation. I would examine you and do as many objective tests as I can. I mean, the most important thing about these tests is that you can do them before the season begins and get a baseline for all of your players, and then you can compare them to how the player is after the event, because everyone is different. I mean, obviously, my cognitive status is not the same as someone else's at baseline, especially if you've had prior injuries. And knowing your entire career, I would talk to you about how you feel and whether you really feel right about it and whether you feel good, and I would examine you and try to have an objective answer for you. And if you were still having symptoms or still having some objective findings, balance loss, memory loss, loss of inhibition, emotionality, things that are less clear than a simple, test on a checklist.
And if I say to you, and you've known me since
childhood,
you know me. I'm hard as a rock. I care about this game more than anything I've ever experienced in my life. We're not talking about a game. We're talking about the 7th game of the Stanley Cup. We're talking about negotiation for the future. We're talking about my place in the history of hockey. We're talking possibly about my ability to move from player into broadcasting or get rid of him. I'll be an agent for others. Doc, I want to play. Does that cut any ice with you?
No.
No.
No, it has to do with whether you should play or you shouldn't play. And if I've known you this long, I have an emotional attachment to you. I care about you. I want you to not have a problem. Because if you hurt your knee, I can replace your knee. I can't replace your brain.
I don't think there's a medical answer to this question, because I think we have to be humble in 2011 that we do not have a test that can tell us anything definitively yes or no. Even if you're asymptomatic, when I was in Italy in June on a fellowship, the Italian researchers doing magnetic resonance spectroscopy were screaming that why is no one paying attention to the fact that no one returns to their normal baseline MRS at before 30 days after concussion? Why is no one paying attention to this? And that's just because it's too expensive to do to everybody. So I'll say that, and I also want to add...
But wait a second, Chris. Wait a second. You told me before if I was 32.
Yeah.
It's basically my choice.
But now
and I've got 28 days after tomorrow's game to rest.
And I also, thinking up here now, I realize that I don't necessarily believe you have free will in this situation.
What?
Because the reason we don't ask athletes on the sideline whether or not they want to go back in is A, because of the pressure, but B, because guess what? They just had a brain injury, and they're not thinking too straight. So you just had a brain injury yesterday. I can be pretty confident that you are not at 100% today when you're trying to make this decision.
Are we at 100% when we're allowed to vote? Are we at 100% to go into the military? Who is 100%?
Well, there's argument. I take care of cyclists and bicycle racers. At the end of the efforts that they do are really exhausted. I mean, there's an exhaustion that is truly, you've burned every match in the book. And there's argument that even that exertion causes cognitive impairment and not necessarily injury. So it can be a fuzzy line whether or not you're actually having symptoms of a concussion or the exertion.
I'll be damned if a citizen's ability to exercise his or her free will is to be dictated to by doctors.
Well, then you won't be playing professional sports.
You know what? It's not your free will to play
I'll become
on
a
professional club.
Right? Are all journalists at 100%, Lesley?
One element, it was a little bit to Chris's point, is that the leagues are doing things because it is an imperfect science. What 100% is a concussion. You see great fines now, and Harry, I'd like to hear Harry speak to this. Great fines now in the NFL for helmet-to-helmet contact. Roger Goodell has really, it was started by Paul Tagliabue. Well, they do, though. That is a legitimate point, that the awareness now for a player is a helmet-to-helmet will cost you. Because
all right, we'll get to football. I want to know, do you care if I play? You've got the contract for the 7th game.
Of course I do. But, I mean, I don't have anything to do with that.
Oh, you sound like Pontius Pilate. You know, well, let somebody else decide. I just show the pictures, right?
Well, I mean, you know.
By the way, did you show the pictures of me sprawled out on the ice yesterday?
Yeah, of course we did.
Did you do replays?
Of course we did.
You really drove it into the audience's mind?
They may be
the
running
violence?
right now.
Yeah.
The violence?
These highlights are playing somewhere on television right now. Yeah. I mean, that's the way it works.
And you have the nerve to say you have nothing to do with this?
Listen, you know, television is oftentimes accused of controlling everything, but we don't, you know, we don't put players out on the ice or on the field. Or, you know.
Ted, this is a great opportunity because those of us who are not in television don't have that type of relationship with the sport that television networks do, because television networks pay huge rights fees.
That's exactly right.
And have a lot at stake. So
I get the feeling I'm listening to Werner von Braun. I just send the rockets up. There they come down. It's not my department.
There's never been a
conversation. So I'm Pontius Pilate and Werner von Braun.
Right.
Keep going.
Guy.
There's never been a conversation.
Will you still be my friend in the morning?
Yes. Yes.
With a network executive and a league official about the...
No. I mean, honest to God, I don't think so. I mean, do you pick up the phone to Gary Bettman and say, we really need Arthur Miller out there tomorrow? I mean, everybody knows they want you out there. But
Bettman may know that if he plays, ratings will likely be higher, and therefore that next contract.
Oh yes, that's right.
So
the
there may not be
NHL's
a
next
conversation, but
contract
there is
is on the
certainly
table.
We need
an
Willis
implicit
Reed
effect.
walking down the tunnel. That's the image you want. That's the image the commissioner wants. That's the image any sport wants. They want the heroic try.
But I can also make a very strong point that Game 7 of any event is the penultimate event, and it's something that people want to see. Okay, you're not able to play. What are they going to be able to do?
Brendan's shaking his head.
No, I'm
I
shaking
think we
my
all
head
had a
because-
head injury.
I'm shaking my head because as much as we are apparently in a fantasy world, I think we've entered into a fantasy world in the fantasy world. Like, the players don't know or care about the TV executives or the reporters, or in this moment, they don't even care about their agents. They just care about winning. That's the pressure. I'm telling you, the pressure is internal with their team. That's true and that's fair. Again, like I said, you want to play hurt. But now, and the other thing I'm wondering, you keep saying knocked out or knocked down. There's a huge difference to me.
All right, on that note.
I just want to finish that when you're in that room, to imagine that some TV executive's calling the commissioner, the coach to tell him to play, The players they are so shut off from all of this. You don't know after you've won the cup, you open up your eyes, you go, wow, the world. You have the blinders on. That is all you're thinking about. You don't care about anybody else's opinion, contracts, whatever. I don't care about my agent, the TV, all that stuff. I just want to win.
How many cups
How
many cups have you won, Brendan?
Let me switch sports. Let's go to football. Let's go to football. Obviously, Harry, your team's just won the conference championship. Today, you know the structure, of course. So what's up next? Couple of weeks. Super Bowl. But you or I, one of us, third quarter of the conference championship, got hit badly. And one of the docs says, it looks like a grade 2. Steve, what's grade 2?
Symptoms last more than 15 minutes, but no loss of consciousness.
No loss of consciousness. You got 10 days before the big game. What's going through your head?
Now, who got concussed, you or me?
Oh. You better answer correctly.
Let's say it's me. Let's say it's me, and we're teammates. We are the great defensive strength of the Giants in the backfield. And we're one hell of a team. We read each other's minds. We instinctively know where the other is in terms of pass coverage. You need me, Harry. It's a hypothetical.
What am I going to do?
Do you want me to play?
I want you to play if you are able to play and if you're cleared to play. But I also understand that if you can't play, that guy who's backing you up will have to step up, and he's going to have to play. If you're going to be affected in such a way that it's going to take away from your aggressiveness, from your ability to make decisions, from your the ability to react to certain situations, then it would be worse for you to be on the field than for you to be on the field.
Okay, fair enough, but you're worried about my ability to do my job. You didn't express a worry about my health.
I am concerned about your health. Whether it's, and I'm the captain, okay?
Yes, you're okay. You be the captain.
All right. I am, first and foremost, I am concerned about your health, even over the game, because at the end of the day, it's just a game. Your health is most important. You know, if you ever see when a player is down and out and there is a possibility of a spinal cord injury, you'll see all players gathered, because at that point they stop thinking about it being a game. They're gladiators. The humanity within them start to come out at that point. So yes, I care about your health, and I would like for you to have the opportunity to get on the field and play in the next game. But if you are not able to play, we are just going to have to man up. Somebody's going to have to step up, and that is the sign.
Looks, though, as if I can play.
Well,
looks as if I can play. You know, we've had a couple of practices since winning the conference.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Harry, I'd actually give you a bit of a pass to express, in this scenario, what you did at the beginning, because as a captain, you are concerned about whether the people on the field can do their jobs, because if they are not able to do their job, that affects you, that affects everyone else on the field. In that scenario where the Super Bowl is at stake, whether it's the Stanley Cup, I'll give you a pass to say that you are first and foremost concerned about that your teammate's ability to do his job, because it affects everyone on the field at that time. Yes, we know you're concerned about his health, and maybe that's the PC answer to give, but in that scenario, and it may be, to adjust the scenario, if this happened in the first quarter of the Super Bowl, and similar to Jay Cutler, and he couldn't go back in, I would love to know what was going on that sideline when your starting quarterback, who doesn't look like there's anything physically wrong, suddenly is not in the game?
If that player has been pulled for any reason, there has to be a reason, a medical reason for that player not to be there. And you, in the heat of competition, you don't second guess the doctor. If the doctor pulls him out, if the trainers pulls him out, then you really don't have time to think about why isn't he here. You have to continue to play the game because you're in the midst of controlled chaos, so to speak. And so you have to go out and play your game and not worry about who's not on the field and who's not there, because that next person who is backing him up, you have to have confidence in that person that he can come in and take up where that guy who...
But you know in your heart of hearts that there's a performance gap between me and my backup.
Well, if there is a performance gap and that person is not there, my friend, if he's not there, we're going to have to rally around that backup and encourage him to step forward and play the game of his life because we need him.
Harry, I'm worried you're going to judge my client because he's in the training room too much. I'm worried that as a symbol of this team, you're going to judge him harshly if he's got a headache and not a broken knee. I can sell a knee to management. I'm worried about what your opinion of it is going to be, and then I'm worried how it's going to affect Roy and maybe anybody else.
He's being very polite. You think I'm a wimp.
Well, at that point, I really don't care what you think. You are the agent. You're not in the locker room. We know about one another. We know the heart of each other. That's why we play the game. Aside from the dollars and the cents, it is bonding together of those 11 players or those 22 players, or that is really what you go out to play for, those guys. And quite frankly, I played some of my best games when I was physically hurt. And the reason why, it wasn't about contracts per se. It was because those guys who I left out on the field, I felt that they needed me to show leadership and be there for them.
Do you think you were ever concussed?
I know I've been concussed. Many times.
Did the medical team know about it back then?
Back then, it was considered getting your bell rung, dinged, not fully a concussion, and there was not a whole lot of research that went into this phenomena, this condition. So everybody got concussed.
And you concussed others.
And I concussed others very well.
It is. You know, it's written in the Bible, right? Well, it's more blessed to concuss than be concussed, right?
But also, you look at Newton's third law of physics. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So those times when I was hitting people, I was also feeling the impact myself.
When you were playing with Lawrence Taylor.
He played with me.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. I know that as a Giant fan. Now, if I were a fly on the locker room wall, you and Taylor, did you ever talk about hitting people?
Occasionally.
You want to share with us what you might have talked about?
Well, I mean, you know, you talk about hitting someone so hard that the snot bubbles, you know, come out of their nose. Or, you know, you hit somebody so hard and they sound like a little girl when you hit them. You know, as a defensive player, those are some of the things that you sort of talk about. You know, Chris played the game at Harvard. And, you know, as a defensive player, that's sort of what you like as a defensive player.
Look at the smile on your face. He's smiling.
I'm with you, Harry. Make him bleed.
Let me get Dino into this. Now you were a pro for 6 years.
Yes, sir.
What you've heard around the table, anything sound strange?
Well, the guy at the end that's an agent, that kind of turns my stomach that he's even...
He does mine.
That's what we're supposed to be doing.
I don't know if he's acting as an agent or he was an agent, because as a player, you know, we looked at those guys as really vultures and guys that were trying to make money on us, and we really didn't pay much attention to them, especially when it came to injury. And as far as a player of mine on my team that got hurt, knowing what I know now and having friends of mine that I played with that have trouble speaking, there's no way I'd want that guy to play. There's no way. Super Bowl, no Super Bowl. There's no way. From what we know now and all the research Chris has done, it's ridiculous to even think about that. You're talking about somebody who's going to have mental problems for the rest of their life.
But, knowing what we know now, we have a different mindset.
Harry, back when we played...
But at the time that it's happening, where we did not know.
No,
it's a different mindset.
The concussion test back then was how many fingers I have up. The doctor would look at you and say, how many fingers I have up. In 1980, I took a bad hit in a game. And so it's a totally different world. But knowing what we know now, man, the player's health has got to be the #1 motivation for
Harry,
any
you're
doctor.
22. You just graduated from college. You were All-American. Want to play pro ball, knowing what you now know?
Knowing what I know.
You don't want to play? You don't want to be with the guys in the locker room?
I have a book, Captain for Life. St. Martin's Press. And in writing this book, I honestly asked the question from a physical standpoint. You understand, I understood when I was 6 and I went to my first college football game that you can get hurt. From a physical standpoint, you have to assess the risk. Are you willing to play the game, knowing that you can hurt your knee and so forth? And I would say, yes, I still would want to play the game. Knowing what I know now from a neurological standpoint, knowing that once you injure your brain, you may never, ever be the same. There is absolutely no way that I would play again.
And you have sons, don't you?
I have sons. I have 2 sons, and I didn't want them to play. I have a grandson who I've already made my point clear to my daughter. At 2, he will not play football.
At any level?
At any level.
No matter what his skill is?
I don't care.
You don't care?
I don't care.
But I'm a recreational athlete. I was never a professional. I've had 4 concussions. I've broken several bones. I've torn ligaments. It's part of being an athlete. So how do you draw the line between, getting 4 concussions falling off a ski, slope versus being a pro football player? I don't know how you.
The question is, how important is that child to you? If you know that by allowing that child to play football, in essence, you're playing Russian roulette. Yeah, they can go through it, and nothing might happen to them. But what if they get hit that one time where they are never, ever the same as they were when they were little? Unfortunately, as Dino has said, we know guys who have gotten hit in the head. I know high school players who never went to college who are now dealing with the issues of concussions in their 20s. I know guys who went to college who never got to the pros who are dealing with the issues of concussions in their 30s. And Dino and I and Chris obviously know players who have played on the NFL level and who are great players, but now they're dealing with dementia, Alzheimer's, and ALS. And there is a direct association with the concussions that they've sustained and what they're dealing with now. And the NFL has finally admitted that there is a connection, so much so that they've donated a large sum of money to Mr. Nowinski and his program up in Boston.
Those Harvard guys know how to get money. So Dino, what are you doing? You're coaching kids to hurt each other.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you. I wanted to ask the doc with the Rangers, do you do baseline testing for all the players?
Yeah, we do.
Okay, so we do it in high school now. So every junior varsity and varsity player comes in, he takes a baseline test. And I guess the question I have, I always thought that was the first line of defense. If a player took a bad hit, the next day we would get him in there and have him take the test. Just recently, this past season, boy, this summer scored a 45 on the test. He came in after the hit and scored a 15. Well, he didn't play the rest of the year. Now, I don't really know if that test is that effective, but you know, for us in high school, we're always going to, you know, err on the side of caution. And the game has wonderful things to teach young people. And I disagree with Harry. I had 3 boys. All my boys played football. But knowing what I know now, I watched them, and I watched them very carefully. And if they had any kind of head injury, you know, they sat out. I didn't care what the doctor said. I didn't say what anybody said, because of all the friends I have that have problems now. So we're all, especially in high school, we are all over it. You know, I check the kids' chin straps, air in the helmet every Friday before the game, because they're kids. They're not paying attention to these little things. So, you know, as far as that goes, making sure they have the proper chin strap on and the helmet with the proper amount of air in it, and all of those little things, and making them know you're taking a baseline test, and if you have a head injury, come and tell us right away. We'll get you checked out. We'll get you to a doctor. We'll get you to get an MRI to you, and then if it's multiple, his career's over. Especially like Chris was saying, under 18 years old.
Can I add one more piece of evidence to the discussion? I think we're getting a little concussion-centric here in the discussion. Well, first, I want to say I agree with everything Harry says, and I'm a huge fan. Harry was one of the first guys I ever interviewed when I was trying to learn about this, and he put everything in perspective for my book, Head Games. You did it first. But we're focused on concussions, and I think we have to appreciate the fact that there's growing evidence that subconcussive blows, the regular hits that we take, are destructive. There's a study that came out 2 days ago from the researchers at the University of Rochester showing that kids who took a diary of how many times they were hit in the head who were never concussed, their brains on some very good scanning were physically damaged, almost like a concussed athlete. And so the difference between a recreational athlete who has 4 concussions in a lifetime versus a Harry Carson is 30,000 blows to the head. And that's what we're missing with these high school kids, is that they are taking an average of nearly 1,000 blows to the head, most 999 of which are not going to cause concussion, but are probably still damaging their brain on some level. And so this is not a problem we can control just by baseline testing or handling concussions properly.
There's one voice we haven't had. What have you heard, Arthur?
Well, I've heard that the aim of the doctors is health. The aim of the agent is some sleazy money acquisition, but at least for the athlete, partly. I've heard that there's a battle about whether or not to let somebody play from their self-interest. What I haven't heard is 2 other things. One is, if I don't get on top of this concussion thing as the commissioner, then I'm not going to have any athletes coming up. My game is going to be destroyed, because for every image that they keep putting Sidney Crosby on or discussing him, there's a parent somewhere like Harry who's going to say, you're not playing. So if I don't get on top of this, my sport is going to die, and that's part of the reason I may not let you play.
Well, shouldn't it die?
Well,
if Harry's
so that
right,
leads me to the
shouldn't it die?
second thing. It's great to listen to the possibilities and the maybes about what subtle or minor brain damage might be and what it might mean to function, but I better get on top of equipment. I mean, we're talking about blowing air into your helmet and a better chin strap and a better mouthpiece. Maybe that's good. Maybe that accelerates the level of damage that's done, because people really go all out. I certainly saw people go all out when they felt they had a helmet on their head and speared somebody. They knew what that meant. I got to get on top of this by equipment, too. I've got to make the rules safer. I noticed the NFL said, okay, we're not going to do as many kick returns. We're going to try and, drop back where we kick off from and or where we receive the kicks. We have to redesign the games to be healthy, or the games will, I think, die of their own risk factors. And that's part of the reason I may not let you play in Game 7, because I'm worried about what that means if you do get concussed. What's that going to do across Canada, North America, to the parents who are thinking like, Harry, my kid isn't going to play that game. Chess team.
What do you...
I want to make a comment about equipment, because Brendan was nice enough to ask me to be on a panel for the NHL. And there's a counterintuitive thought here, because what the lay people think, and what I would think if I wasn't more educated about this stuff, is, well, the more equipment, the more padding, the more you protect each other. You know, you're not going to get hurt. It's like a shield. But it's just the opposite, because, as Brendan pointed out at the meeting, now you see hockey players thinking they're Iron Man, and they propel themselves like bullets, because they realize the equipment's going to protect them. So they don't think about what their consequences might be.
You're absolutely right. Before I became a vulture, I played football for 15 years. And I saw it in the scope of my career beginning in 1979 and finishing sometime around 1990. The idea that the helmet had changed dramatically from a suspension helmet I didn't want to get into a head-to-head collision with because it rang like a bell, to one that was absolutely effective for me to use as a weapon right from the get-go. The same thing about shoulder pads. The first pair of shoulder pads I ever put on hurt me if somebody banged too hard on them. By the last pair, I was wearing a Donzi shoulder pad where a guy could bang me over the head with an aluminum baseball bat and it wouldn't hurt me. And what it's done to our games is it's moved them up away into a more violent collision, and probably in a way that we used to take care of ourselves. And it is a sustainability issue, just as you said. It's great that NYU is having this conversation, because in 1905, after football was banned for a year and the flying wedge was banned, NYU was the site of the first conference that began the conversation that banned offense from taking the ball as far back as they wanted and coming forward at the defense. So there is some element of it. There was a study done about the New York Jets, 1969 New York Jets. No AstroTurf, bad helmets, almost no brain injury from that group. Some arthritis, some mauled fingers, but nothing is bad. And I wonder if, Chris, you may even say this too, do our Ivy League careers, they don't compare with Harry and Dino's pro careers. The hits multiply, I'm guessing.
Wait, so that.
Are we lucky that we played in the Ivy League and not onto the NFL level and added 20,000 times more hits?
Not necessarily.
Is it exponential growth?
The younger brain is far more sensitive to the damage, so I think you're probably worse off between 6 and 10 than you are with 25 to 30.
Okay.
Well, that may be the difference between college and pros, just the maturation level. So, young Boland, you would suggest that we go back to George Clooney in Leatherheads. Remember that movie?
Well, I mean,
nobody got hurt when they were wearing leather helmets. They didn't hit each other in the head.
Well, one of the fundamental questions.
That's not true. They got skull fractures back then.
Yeah,
that were catastrophic.
The work that we're doing with our equipment manufacturers now, when we started to have more of these serious injuries, and we suggested that it's sort of strange to suggest that the less we protect the players, the safer that they'll be. And really it's about moving the equipment into high density foams and gels, equipment that is about absorption and not projection. Right now the hard plastics and the shells, the suits of armors that football players and hockey players have grown up wearing. And again, I think we also recognize here that it doesn't matter the size or strength of your helmet, that the concussion, the helmet protects the skull from cracking. But if you shake the egg doesn't need to break for you to get a concussion. But going back to the equipment, we've asked our equipment manufacturers last year, and we're coming out with prototypes this year, where the only piece of plastic, the only hard piece of thing on a shoulder pad is over the heart and over the spine. But all of the projection points are going to be high-density foams.
Who regulates the manufacturing of equipment?
Up until now, the manufacturers have sort of, and Dr. Feldman came to this meeting that we had last year. We did it in conjunction with the Players Association. We're taking it back, in a sense. The NHL, if you want your equipment worn in an NHL game, we have to approve it. So we've asked them to go to the research and development camps and come up with smaller profiled. A player in hockey, we don't have an out of bounds. You have to respect the playing environment. And we also work in the playing environment. We're getting rid of seamless glass and going to all plexi. We're making sure that the playing environment is safer as well. But you should slow down before you get to the boards. You shouldn't. I put my 6-year-old son in hockey, and he didn't wear shoulder pads. When he joined a league, he had to wear shoulder pads, and the first thing I saw him doing was banging himself with a stick on the shoulders. And he thought it was hilarious because it didn't hurt. And that's to a certain degree where we want to go. We want to respect we want players to be protected. We want their shoulders to be protected. but not overprotected
But
to the point
isn't
where
it
they don't
as much,
respect the playing environment.
Brendan, about technique? I mean, Dino, I can't believe you teach your kids helmet-to-helmet contact. Now, you all played in a league that was allowed. So isn't it significant when the most significant element of this discussion is how it will trickle down to youth sports? What is it, 2 million concussions are undiagnosed of kids in sports? And don't you think now you are teaching different from the way you were taught?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's my coaches know that if a kid puts his head down or makes helmet-to-helmet contact, that's something they can get very, very upset about. And, we'll punish the kids and make them run because we really have to teach them, especially keep their heads up when they're tackling. And it's a big emphasis on how we teach the kids.
Dr. Varlotta, hold on.
Can I ask a question?
I want to switch to boxing.
I had a feeling I'd be last.
What do you do?
You do
what
the
do
best
you do there at ringside?
Well, you observe the competitiveness of the two boxers. You see if there's a competition there, and
it's a competition to concuss each other, right? You are sitting and watching two people trying to concuss each other.
That's correct.
Is that something a doctor should do?
Well, you should be there to protect the athletes and the players.
How about being there to ban it?
It's not my decision to ban it.
Oh, another Pontius Pilate. Because we're now, I think, slipping over and asking about responsibility.
Well, the responsibility
maybe if I were a nasty, mean, cruel person, I would say, Dr. Varlotta, you and Andy are unindicted co-conspirators. You are the people who are preserving the Roman Colosseum.
I don't think that's entirely true.
Nothing I say is entirely true. My students tell me that every day. But stop and think about it. We've all watched Spartacus and Gladiator and those films. That Colosseum looks like MetLife Stadium to me. Sure. And they're down in the pit, instead of 2 guys, or 22 guys, or 2 guys in the ring. And certainly in boxing, the notion is to render the opponent into a condition condemned here by your colleagues, unconsciousness. All I did was fall on the ice. What we're now talking about an activity to render people unconscious. So I'm sort of asking a mega question, since we're in the medical school, and there are 5 of you on the panel. What should the role of medicine be when we look at our contact sports? And of course, so many sports can be contact. Baseball can be contact, batter hit by pitch, slide into second base, all that stuff. But boxing is sort of the poster child for the Roman Colosseum. The only difference is in the Roman Colosseum, the crowd wanted to see the loser killed. And they reveled in that. Now, we don't want that anymore. And when they do get dementia or Alzheimer's or what have you, we don't want to see them. It's 2,000 years. I suppose it's progress, but not a hell of a lot.
Medicine better, you didn't ask me, but
you?
Just for an ethics comment, since you tossed one up there, I think medicine's job is to say, this goes too far, boxing ought to be banned. This goes too far, mixed martial arts ought to be banned. The damage is obvious. Medicine's job is to speak up for health of the participants, say what the toll is, and draw the line when it says either this game overall is just too dangerous, you can't have a game or a sport where the intention is to pound the other guy into unconsciousness. That isn't acceptable from a health point of view. I'm just saying what medicine's job is. I didn't say what politicians or lawyers or agents might say. Medicine should stand for protecting health. Boxing is inconsistent. Football's close. There may be ways to design the game or refine it that minimize the harm, but medicine's got to be the place where health is first.
Well, you assume that you have the power to do that.
Hold it. An ethical comment. I agree with you. And as a doctor, smoking should be banned because smoking and alcohol represents 60% of hospital admissions. How do you ban smoking and alcohol? How do you ban a sport?
I think medicine fights for that. It
well,
tries to
we
get on
fight
board
for it,
those
but
restrictions.
there's a big chasm between what ethically is correct and what is actually doable.
Medicine can't do everything, but it can say, our job is to protect health, and what you do is dangerous to health. Some of what you do is inimical to health, because we know what the damage is to the boxers. You don't have to collect a big sample there to see what happens over 20 years of being a fighter. Nobody comes out particularly well. I think you do what you can as an advocate for health. Society may say, I don't care about poor people. I don't care about the kind of people that enter into boxing or mixed martial arts. I don't care. They're just poor, usually ethnically minority types. If they want to beat each other up for the pleasure of us all, well, that's great. We'll pay tickets. That's not medicine's job to just roll over and accept it.
Well, he does.
Well,
I don't mean to beat up on him.
No,
just
medicine
to get
has
the
never
issue out.
accepted that. Medicine has never accepted it. We've always monitored the boxers. We've done physicals on them. We've done MRIs. We've evaluated them, and we still say it's unsafe for you to go.
I mean, you could do that with fencing too. You could say, don't
it.
put tips on the end of the swords. Have your duels stab each other, and we'll step in when, damage is a little extreme.
We don't have the power to shut down a sport. We have the power to make recommendations about how to make the sport safer. And who listens to us, it's really not up to us in terms of making a rule.
No.
And also, people pay tickets, pay money to watch.
Isn't that a little cheap?
People pay to watch
I
pay-per-view
won't talk
boxing.
because nobody's listening to me?
They don't listen to us. I mean, we can talk as much as we want, and we still do talk.
I don't agree with that. They listen to you. You got to speak louder.
Well, my question is why all of a sudden now, or I don't know, maybe it's not all of a sudden, why has the awareness gotten so high? Why all of a sudden is there a story every day?
The doctors are doing a better job speaking up. The technology's better to detect the problem.
And the media, too.
No, I think society is speaking up.
Yeah,
I think
and
society is speaking
starting
up.
to speak up.
I mean, boxing itself has evolved in the 20 years I've been doing boxing, and it's no longer about knocking out the player. I mean, a single punch causes brain damage, and it's no longer about knocking out a player. So you start looking at boxing matches a little differently. So many of the recent boxing matches, you'll see the guy back off because he doesn't want to hurt the opponent.
I mean, I'd like to go with you there, but you know what's replacing boxing. And it's a more brutal form.
Well, MMA has been resisted
where they
by
don't
myself.
pay the athletes nearly as much.
Yeah.
MMA has been resisted by myself and the other people within the New York State Athletic Commission as becoming a sport.
Well, you ask why now? I think the reason why it's so visible now is the internet. I think that for years and years and years, when you had athletes who retired from the game, they sort of went back to wherever they lived, and they lived out there the rest of their lives. Now you have athletes who are dealing with dementia and other ailments, and their wives have gone online to talk to other wives and to draw attention. It wasn't so much the players. It was people like Sylvia Mackey who stepped forward when her husband John Mackey was dealing with dementia, and she saw what was happening with so many other wives who had to become caregivers to their husbands. And so when you have these women talk about what their husbands had been going through, people sit up and they start to listen. Now, if you're talking about guys, people probably say, well, they played the game, they got paid, and, it comes with playing the game. But when you have wives talking about it, people zone into it much more. Also, with high-def television, when you can see through high definition, when a player is concussed and you see his eyes roll back in his head, you know, there's a clear indication that people see it's a very violent game. Not that it wasn't, not that people didn't see before, but they see it so much better in high def.
I want to just, I know Ted glossed over it, but I also want to give the media credit because these are stories that weren't covered 15 years ago. The stories about concussions have been much more in-depth and regular than they were a decade ago. But also, when you have something like what happened in February where Dave Dorson commits suicide and shoots himself in the chest because he wants his brain examined and donated to science after his death, when you have enough of these kinds of incidents, and we've had several similar incidents just in this last year, people have to take notice. And all of these factors are coming into play to make this topic rise to the level that it's being seen now.
I think that one of the most horrifying things that I've seen, and Harry referenced her, but when the great John Mackey and his wife went down and appeared before Congress in a hearing about the treatment that players get after they, or lack of treatment they get after they retire. But to see John Mackey sitting there, probably not knowing where he is. I mean, this is one of the great players in the history of the game, now reduced to, you know, I mean, that video, hit that on YouTube. Those are the kinds of things that change the whole deal.
Let me ask the doctors. We've agreed, Lesley led us there, made a clear statement that the core of this subject, the most important aspect of this subject, is not Sidney Crosby, as sad as that may be, at least temporarily. It's the kids. It's the 2 million kids moving up and playing contact sports. Those 2 million kids are all going to be patients of doctors. Now, what's the responsibility of this great medical school in terms of training the doctors that are going to come out of this great medical school in terms of those 2 million kids? Steve, is it in your curriculum?
You know, it is. So in our department, at least, we train our future doctors about what concussion is, what traumatic brain injury is, and I can tell you that, you know, when I was in medical school, I like to think back in the Middle Ages, all we learned about concussion or traumatic brain injuries was what the glaucoma score was. Now we're learning that, you know, repeated concussions are bad, subconcussions are bad, these are the symptoms, this is what you have to do to treat it. And now we're making some tough decisions. And I'm glad to say now, because of the media campaign to increase awareness, I am getting a lot of kids brought in by their parents. No, should Johnny play football again after his 4th concussion? So this is a good thing.
And Dennis, are the people coming out of this school taught what to look for, how to probe at the questions that are anterior to a diagnosis of concussion or brain injury?
So the answer is yes and no. So in the orthopedic department, for example, absolutely. They are now, the curriculum has changed now that it's such a big deal in the media, concussion, and we're hearing so much about it. So they are absolutely exposed to concussion and how to recognize concussion and treatment. The problem is, say, in an orthopedic surgical residency, is you can imagine that's potentially a low priority for them. So yes, they're taught it. How much they take away from it is certainly a bit of a question, but it has become priority, and for all, you know, I think we all teach in sports medicine that the health of the athlete is the primary thing that we do out there for these athletes. I think part of the confusion when it comes to concussion is we still don't know a lot about concussion. We just, you know, there's still too many unanswered questions, and whether, you know, I was playing devil's advocate before and with Andy, but there's truly so much we don't know, and who knows even with these professional athletes, you know, what's the incidence of just Alzheimer's disease and dementia in the general population? Are we so sure that it was from all these head injuries? I mean, there's just a lot of issues that we still don't know yet. Sure, we'd like to believe that it's concussion, and it's easy for us to take these athletes out of sport, but are we just responding to the media at this point? You know, I think medicine's become very evidence-based. And in medicine, we don't have such good evidence right now what to do with concussion and how to treat and how to respond to all of this.
The effects of concussion are very individual. The long-term, the short-term effects. You can have one person who has repetitive lower-level concussions and ends up with severe problems. So you need to individualize your assessment and your treatment to that particular individual. So there is no exact test that can show this, but there's a complex of different means of coming to the right answer for each individual.
As a sports medicine educator, which is, I guess, one of my, one of the hats I wear, and Lath, who's the chief of the department, has gone out of his way to make sure that the training that we give our fellows and our residents and the medical students that observe and the people coming in from other countries who watch us, the full training. Okay, so let me give you an example. When I was a high school athlete, there was no team doctor on the side. There was, one of his minions fourth down the line who wouldn't even have any idea what a concussion was, let alone be able to diagnose and treat it. But now we're training 3-4 fellows a year. We're training guys who are going to go in and be sports medicine docs. Obviously, there's only so many teams, but the amount of doctors that are going to be involved in this discipline exponentially is increasing. And not everybody's taking care of a pro team. So a lot of these people that we're training are going to be taking care of high school teams, and they're going to be taking care of club teams. And the medical treatments that the players get are going to be better, and the symptoms are going to be better recognized if we, as teachers, train the guys and women now to be able to recognize it. And
Arthur, you look like the Cheshire Cat.
I'm wondering, the speeches for health are all good. I want to know if we're teaching the students, if the dad says, I don't care if he's had 4 concussions, his scholarship lies down this road and I'm going to keep letting him play and pushing him to play, are you going to report him for child abuse?
Well, you are required to, actually, I think, if you feel that the parent is endangering the child.
I'm just asking if we're teaching it.
Well, you're required to, if you believe that the parent is abusing the child and not allowing them to, or allowing them to endanger themselves.
So I've seen a lot of parents who are quite willing to put their kids into God only knows what circumstance. I'm thinking Texas high school football, but you can make up your scenario. I don't think anybody talks to them about that.
Well, in Minnesota, I was when I did my residency, we took care of the high school teams, and I had a few kids really couldn't remember where they were knocked out. I had to almost get into altercations with their parents because their parents were insisting that they continue to play.
Well, do you like the idea of reporting for child abuse?
No, you don't like it, but you have to do it if you think the child is in danger, absolutely. And it goes further than just concussion. It's any injury in a young person who's just starting out in a sport. And Dennis and I frequently co-host a radio show on Sirius, and we have parents calling in and talking about how frustrating it is that their kids specialize in sports so early. I mean, they're starting to play sports and football on traveling teams when they're 7 years old. And this is a cumulative thing. And you need to have conversations in your office. It starts there, educating the parents then. This is not healthy. This is not good. You need to move on from this. It's not worth it.
I happen to sit on the Parks and Recreation Committee for my town, and we just had a petition to start in 3rd grade travel football and travel soccer. And I think there's somebody that's just gone plain nuts out there. So in January, we're actually reaching out and having a program that's going to be mandated for the entire town, and we're going to invite the surrounding community about hearing about concussions. So we're reaching out to the public. We can't sit here as a medical center and expect people to come to us anymore. We have to reach out to them and show them the effects and educate the parents, the parent coaches, because all of these AAU coaches and et cetera are all parents who actually coach their own kids, and that's where their interest is in their children. So we have to reach out and go to the public. We can't sit here and expect them to come to us. So I think the outreach is extremely important.
Arthur, one last thing. You've heard our media panelists speak. Any reaction to them?
I think they're kind, loving individuals. No, well, I mean, I think on the plus side, I agree that there has been more coverage oriented toward telling the story of harm and damage and the cost in the media, in Sports Illustrated, in other TV documentary formats, that sort of thing. You do see those stories start to appear, and I don't remember them 15, 20 years ago, people who stopped playing, disappeared into some void, I don't know where they went. But at the same time, you know, if we added up media glorification of violent hits, the sort of, you know, tough guy in the sport, who's going to be the Willis Reed, who's got guts, if you watch the editorializing
It's
around.
on ESPN.
Yeah. I mean, even the hockey, you know, that biggest hits of the NFL, biggest hits of the NHL, there's plenty of glorification of the violent part of sports and hyping that up and up and up. So I think the media has a little bit of a mixed message. Be careful, watch the health, think about your kid, and man, that's a hell of a hit. We got to get that back up on YouTube right away.
Just before we started today, one of the people from SCPS, on his little hand device,
It dates you a little bit, yes.
Yeah, it dates me. It dates me. I'm dated. I'm a confessed old fogey. He replayed for me, and Harry will remember this. Everybody should remember this. Lawrence Taylor's hit on Joe Theismann, a perfectly legal hit, a freak hit. Theismann never played again. And there it is. It's as if it happened this afternoon. It's right there, embedded permanently in everyone's handheld device. And it's an illustration of, I know Ted is holier than thou, accepts no responsibility whatsoever. But the fact remains, you watch NFL football on a Sunday, you watch NHL, and boy, you guys love to do the replays on the hits. You love to watch the gurney come in.
No, that's not true. That's baloney.
Yeah, I think that's
too simplistic and baloney. I mean, it's just baloney.
Right. I saw it on Sunday, Ted. Don't tell me.
I'm telling you, it's baloney. The bottom line is, television comes in and they cover the event.
Yes.
They cover the event. And now they cover it in a more sophisticated way
The question
all the
is
time.
whether you are doing the event
right.
as entertainment, as history, in the public interest. And I realize you're the only industry that has its own constitutional amendment. The question, you have a right to do things.
You're talking about responsibility.
You have a right to do things, but is it the right thing to do? That's the ultimate question.
I think the answer to your question is all of the above.
Yeah, I do too.
And at each of those aspects of the broadcast do come into play. But I will say that when you do see a player who is significantly injured to the extent that the gurney comes out, et cetera, everyone is tempered. The broadcasters are tempered. They do talk about the concern. Yes, they'll show it over and over again. I grew up went to school at Stanford, and a couple of weeks ago we lost our wide receiver, Wasu. It was about his fourth hit, and when it occurred the week before the Oregon game, they played it over and over. But it was at that point it was done, but there was a clear concern about him, but showing how violent the hit was, and concern about what he should play
maybe there
again.
is a public service, and Harry pointed to this, in letting people see the violence. The question is one of scale, one of scale. Okay, questions, comments. Come on, get to the mics. They're up here. Left, right. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Lauren. I'm a certified athletic trainer here at NYU. And I wanted to ask if any of you had heard of or had any part in the Concussion Management and Awareness Act that's going into effect in July of 2012. It's affecting high school students. It's supposed to, if they get a head injury or the concussion management team suspects that they have a head injury, they're supposed to not return to play for at least 24 hours. It's supposed to have parents receive an educational pamphlet where they have to sign and acknowledge that they've read this, and I just didn't know if any of you had heard of this or also thought about expanding it into non-specific scholastic sports, or I work with dance medicine, so I'd love to see
So
this.
is there a question?
Yeah, my question is, do you guys see this expanding?
Have you heard of it?
Sorry.
Have you
Have
heard
you heard of it?
Yes.
Do you see it expanding?
We all know it as the Lystead Act. It's now law in New York. Governor Cuomo signed it a day or two ago. Yes.
And that is not the only. Massachusetts has an awareness that parents can access online. There's also, I believe, the Center for Disease Control is putting together a Heads Up Parents, a video that I believe they're going to bring to the Super Bowl this year.
33 states have laws.
I'm sorry?
33 states right now
Yeah.
have laws of educational programs.
Yeah, and the
that need to be
NFL
installed.
has been very powerful in its support.
The NFL and Brendan have been very, very good, and I think Chris has put the light on it in a large measure with his project. So it's been a very, very good program.
Yes, it may hit 50, Roy. It may hit 50.
Hi, my name is Michael. First of all, I want to thank all the panelists for coming out tonight. My question is for Mr. Shanahan. This past summer, 3 NHLers, Derek Bugard, Wade Belak, and Rick Rippon passed away. And the common factor among all of them is that they were all fighters or enforcers in the NHL. With all the rule changes like Rule 48 to make the playing game safer, is there a possibility that fighting, which is one of the most popular parts of the game, will that possibly be eliminated, or would that be considered among as a rule change?
Well, 60% of our games don't have fights anymore, and so it's expensive to buy a ticket to a game. I think if you're spending your hard-earned money just to see a fight, there are more predictive ways of spending that money to see one.
Come to a boxing match.
You know, it's not something that we're ignoring, the deaths of those players, but at the same time to be respectful to them and their families, and I know that Chris has done some work with their families. It's not something I like to talk about this early, and to sort of, I know some of them personally. I think it's a little bit disrespectful to just sort of like lump them into one little group. They certainly had some similarities, and some had different issues for sure. But I guess the bigger answer to your question is, over the years, over the decades, the issue of fighting in hockey and the fact that there is a penalty for it, and whether or not that penalty is severe enough is, I guess, a question that our general managers, our 30 general managers, you know, they make rules from time to time to curb certain aspects of fighting. Hockey's not had a bench-clearing brawl in over 25 years. And I think that these guys, in light of what's happened, will certainly continue to monitor that as we move forward. What I've said to Chris before in this respect is I'm a policy enforcer, not a policy maker. But as we learn more, certainly if history repeats itself, managers will continue to look at that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. My name is Michael. I'm the father of high school athletes that play contact sports like football, basketball, and lacrosse. So I'd like to change, with all due respect, your hypothetical from earlier in the presentation, just modestly. And we're not talking about an NFL championship game or an NHL Stanley Cup championship game. We're talking about, you know, recreational high school athletes. If one is concussed, how long do they need to stay out of playing in order for them to safely heal? And assuming that that has happened, what does the research show about the impact of a subsequent concussion event affecting their overall cognitive ability?
And one of the doctors want to handle that?
I can answer it by telling you I don't have any idea, and nobody has any idea. And that herein lies the problem, because we think we have a handle, again, on what the relative time frame should be. Obviously, a young brain is different than an old brain. Obviously, the consequences are different of a professional, athlete versus a recreational high school athlete. Nonetheless, we really don't know. There is certain criteria, as we've talked about, that if you go by the book, you could potentially get somebody back at whatever time frame that is based on the severity of their concussion and their post-concussion symptoms. That being said, we're not really sure. So
Dino, do you have a protocol?
Yes. Yeah, we first the young boy is evaluated by a trainer, and then the next day he's given the test of the baseline. And if the test is good, we send him to a neurologist, and he has an MRI done. And, I'm not an expert in any of this, and I don't pretend to be. And, he comes back from the doctor, and the doctor gives our trainer a report. and they tell us, hey, this was a severe concussion, he needs to be out for the season. Or, hey, he had some mild symptoms, he wasn't vomiting the night after the game, he wasn't doing this, wasn't doing that. I think he's going to be okay. Leave him out a couple of weeks. If any headaches occur, anything happens in the next week or two, let us know. If not, he's probably cleared to play.
Let me just give you one other part of it, is that in our protocol, once symptoms are cleared, and that doesn't mean 24 hours or 4, there's no time frame. Symptoms are cleared. We get them on a concussion protocol, which means they start out on a bike for 10 minutes and making sure they're not lightheaded, don't have symptoms, and see how they do the next day, monitor them over the night, and then we progress from there. It's a very defined protocol. So there is something in place. Again, I'm not familiar with the particular high school protocol, but I'm sure it's very similar, pretty much universal. That being said, we've done that, as I mentioned earlier, on multiple athletes that aren't playing this year on my team, even though they were cleared to play. So it's a big void of what our knowledge base is.
I just have a question on this protocol stuff. If I'm a high school kid in Belgrade, Florida,
right,
where they're feeders to the University of Miami, how many neurologists and MRI people are going to look at me? I mean, if I'm the parent of that kid.
The first thing is MRIs are not important. I mean, we're going to get an MRI.
I don't care MRI. I'm just asking, who's looking at me if I don't have health insurance?
Generally speaking, the school is required, to have doctors, and any doctor will want to have his consultants. So he'll get you to where you need to be, hopefully, if he's smart, he or she is smart. But the bottom line is all of those tests don't really amount to anything.
There's no structural change. But what we didn't mention also is that recovery from concussion is not just a recovery from and stopping doing physical things. It's brain rest. And some high schools, in fact, we had a guest on just yesterday, or just Monday, talking about his high school's policy. He's a superintendent. And if some child has a concussion, they enforce brain rest. So homework is suspended. They shouldn't be using the internet. They shouldn't be on the computer. They shouldn't be using their brain or using their brain intensely for a period of time until their symptoms resolve. So that's important, especially in young kids.
There's more we don't know than what we know. So we can't advise you at this point. We can only give you the best judgment based on that patient in front of us, and the situation. So it's very individual, and we're trying to do the best from a medical standpoint to come up with the right answers, but it's still very multifactorial and very individual.
And let me make one last comment about this. There's a lot of voodoo out there that is being used because we don't know. So for example, I'm not going to tell you who the person is. We have a player, he's concussed, he's not getting better, his agent is getting anxious, everybody's pissed off, they want the guy back. Let's send him to Buffalo to have this thing on his neck. We know it's a neck problem because that Buffalo guy fixed that player over here. Oh, well, that's not working. Let's send him over to Detroit because they have this touchy-feely guy who uses crystals. I'm not kidding. Okay, and that's okay, except for the touchy.
Peyton Manning had stem cells.
Yeah, well, stem cells are real treatments, but there's a lot of non-science here. Let's have him go to the acupuncture guy, who charges him 15 grand a day to hang with him and do acupuncture, and then let's send him to the ART guy, and it's all okay. And you know what? We sent him to our concussion guy, Dr. Cantu, who Chris works with, and he said what we said all along: rest him. He needs rest. Nothing's helping him. He needs rest. And so there's a lot of science and there's a lot of voodoo.
Okay, just one more thing to add, if I can. So for high school, it is absolutely right. We don't know the symptoms. It's hard to predict it. But typically what it is if that athlete's been asymptomatic at the high school level for 1 week, then they go through that same protocol that Andy was talking about. And that's at minimum of another 5 days. So it's at least 1 week plus 5 days, 12 days that they'll be out. Typically for a high school, if they've cleared all, that's typically 12 days even after they've cleared symptoms. The other thing about high school to think about, females for some reason are at more risk for concussion and head injury than males. And in part 2 of your question, When somebody has their first concussion at the high school age, it's absolutely been shown that for them to get back to contact sport, they are now at increased risk for concussion and increased risk for prolonged loss of consciousness, amnesia, and the more severe symptoms when we think about concussion.
Regardless of
Over
whether
here.
they were whether they were knocked out, it's just
Correct.
for any concussion.
Regardless whether they
Being
had
knocked
loss
out
of
has no
consciousness
indication.
is not a criteria in any way.
Next.
I just wanted to get, my name is Alicia, I'm one of the physical therapists here, and I just wanted to get the panelists' opinion on pro athletes like Peyton Manning coming out saying that he deliberately did poorly on preseason baseline concussion testing in order to be less likely to be pulled from a game in the event of an injury.
Well, on one hand, it's abysmal, but the fact that he said it calls attention to it. So I think there'll be more attention on athletes taking these tests, and you know, the tests are not 100% of the reason that somebody makes a decision about whether an athlete continues to play or not. But certainly, I think hopefully people will monitor those tests a little bit better.
But there's only one person the individual's hurting, and that's themselves.
And you also have to be careful not to allow these returning to baseline levels lull you into a sense of security that everything is okay. The baseline testing, particularly some of these cognitive tests, are only telling you really part of the picture, and then there's much more to safe return than just getting a good score on some of these baseline cognitive tests.
Over here.
And how about the athlete who has had 9 concussions and has memorized the test? Literally.
Used to do that for the Army.
Hi, my name is David. I'm a student at NYU. Thought the panel was very insightful, so thank you. I can't help but wonder what would have happened to Aaron Rodgers if he sustained a 3rd concussion last year. Going into the playoffs, he had 2. So I guess I'm asking for your collective opinion on how the NFL, the Packers, and maybe him by his free will handled the situation.
I covered both those games where he had the first concussions, and they absolutely would sit him. I mean, we're talking about heightened awareness, and you know, as Brendan said, that people now are aware of their bodies. Harry concurred that he would not play. He would absolutely not play if he sustained a 3rd concussion that the doctors here could identify.
Hi, my name is Alia. I'm an attorney for a standards development organization. My question is for Mr. Shanahan. Are you considering the different certifications for hockey helmets? I know there's the NOXI certification, the HEC, there's the CSA standard. Among others, Dr. Stalnecker has come out with other standards. Are you looking at those for a standard for hockey helmets for NHL players? Because they haven't had a standard helmet to wear.
Well, Chris King, who works for us out of Toronto, would probably answer that question better. But again, I think there's been more of a focus and a shift right now, not necessarily on hockey helmets, and because we have improved hockey helmets, we've improved the standards. Marc Messier came out with a great helmet the last couple of years. The problem was persisting, so I think we started to focus our attention. Again, like I said, the helmet will protect the skull. We started focusing more on player behavior and issues like equipment, softer equipment, not only for the impact of the blow, but also how hard will this player hit, or I guess better question, how much more careful will he be when he throws a hit, because he has a little bit of healthy fear that he might hurt himself as well. So we're focusing on softer equipment, shoulder pads to change player behavior, and of course new rules and enforcement of that through suspensions.
Perfect, thank you.
Rusty?
Yeah, it's just very multifactorial, again, with equipment, and I wrote a chapter on ice hockey injuries about 12 years ago. Rink size, the boards and how flexible the boards are. There's a lot of obstacles that go into it, the size of the rinks. So you have to look at equipment, you have to look at the environment that they play in, but you also have to look at the players that they're being put onto the ice and their mentality and approach to the game. So you can have a car and you can drive it recklessly, or you can drive it safely.
I'm going away for 9 days, but okay.
Over here.
By the way, before that question comes, I'm going off the panel because I am the only person here who I think came from out of town, and I have to go back to Philadelphia where they want to make sure the coach gets a concussion for the Eagles. It's been quite a season there as dreams have evaporated. But I just wanted to say thank you to the panelists. I really learned a lot here. Thank you to Arthur Miller for doing such a great job in moderating the session. And the questions are great. I'm sorry I have to miss a few of them.
And I'm going to be right behind you because I actually have another panel that I have to be on this evening. So, it's been great.
My name is Molly. I'm a senior in the sports management program in the Preston Robert Tisch Center. My question's geared more towards Mr. Carson and Mr. Shanahan and the doctors. I think a lot of the discussion tonight's been heavily focused on reacting when concussions occur. What kind of preventative methods, though, do you suggest, I guess, to help avoid these concussions rather than just reacting to them when they occur?
Well, I think when you're a young player, you just sort of go out there and you play the game and you just sort of let your body go. As you become an older player, you have a tendency to play smarter. And you want to keep your head out of certain situations. But, you know, when you play, it's just one of these things that you have to understand that you have to take care of your body. And just play smart. And you know, when I took the field, I never tried to hurt anybody who I played against, and actually, I took them into consideration. If they were going down, and if they were going to get a first down, I'd touch them down. Often, you know, there are times when I'd go in for the kill shot, but I never really tried to hurt, you know, players on the football field because, you know, I know what it's like to get hurt, and I just tried to play as safe as possible. But in terms of concussions, you will always have concussions be a part of the game. I don't think there's any way that you can eliminate it. You know, you talk about the helmets and so forth, and again, it's about the helmet protects the skull. It doesn't protect the brain. And as former players, we don't talk about concussions or injuries while we're playing, but after we finish playing, then we can deprocess and talk about what happened in various games. And, you know, guys have come to me and told me how they tried to block me, and my knee hit them in the head inadvertently, and they sustained a concussion. So, you know, talk about helmet-to-helmet hits, it really doesn't matter. You're going to get dinged during the course of play as long as you're out on the football field.
I think you have to talk statistics here, and I'm talking broad strokes. Broad strokes is you get, you know, 100 concussions in a year. How are you going to make them 50? You're going to get concussions because any contact sport has that happen. Now, I believe in rule changes, and if you look at the evolution of hockey, let's say, you know, 20 years ago, guys were playing without helmets and without goalie masks, and the thought of putting on a helmet was reprehensible to these guys until they put them on, and then they kind of got that okay. Now they start wearing visors, and everybody's against visors. Now the visors are okay. A lot of the hits that are allowable are directly related to the increase in concussion, and if you take away those certain availability of the hits, you're gonna decrease concussion. It's simple.
I think just one more thing to add is that talking about statistics, we already know that having one concussion is going to put you at risk for having another one. So part of prevention is knowing or at least being very cautious in returning someone back to play.
Can I add one more point? Because it's the number one thing in football you can do. Hockey, number one thing you do apparently is hire Brendan Shanahan and let him go nuts on what he's doing. I think they announced they're down with concussions 50% this year, and mostly from player changing their behavior. In football, the number one thing you can do is hit people in the head fewer times. 70% of hits to the head come in practice, and probably 70% of concussions. And so we're trying to train coaches, especially youth coaches, not to hit in practice so much. But no one's talking about that.
Hi, thank you all. My name is Joe Solomine. I'm a sophomore in the sports management program. My question is for Dr. Varlotta. I was just wondering what your opinion was on today the UFC deciding to sue both the New York State Attorney General and Manhattan's Attorney General office to try and uplift the ban of mixed martial arts in New York. And where do you see this going and why you're so against this ban? Why you're so for the ban, sorry.
Well, I think, as we've all said, we have to draw the line someplace. And to permit another sport that's coming in that's excessive is not something in the best interest of society. And MMA has crossed the line, in my opinion. Boxing has been around for many years, and it's changing. I think that the legislators need to recognize that, and I think the lawsuit is just a means of trying to bring money into their sport. So I think it's very self-serving.
All right, thank you.
Over here.
Hi, my name is Sam. I'm in the sports management program at NYU. My question is for Dr. Feldman. Last season, or actually throughout the panel tonight, you were stressing how Sidney Crosby should not be playing or should not have played after he first got hit. Last season, I would think it was February 22nd, 2011, Mark Stahl was hit by his brother, Eric Stahl, and he was allowed to play the last 15 games of the season. He was out for a certain amount of time, and he was given permission to play the last 15 games of the season and played the first series of the playoffs. He is not playing today. He has serious concussion issues. Why was Mark Stahl given this permission to play if he is hurt now?
That's a great question, and I'm going to give you an answer, and then I'm going to give you a little asterisk here because I want to talk about the media in a second. Okay. Number one, it's exactly what I was saying the whole time. He passed every test. Sidney Crosby passed every test. Okay, and there gets to be a time when he's going to the neurologist says he's fine. He goes on the bike. He doesn't have a headache. He doesn't have ringing in his ears. He doesn't have any symptoms whatsoever. He's not going to tell you that he's not right. You know, you'd have to pretty much, strap him down and put a poker on his, on his foot to tell you that. He's not going to do it. And so by the criteria that we have today, which, by the way, is not great criteria, he was allowed to play, as was Sidney Crosby. Now, Sidney Crosby's situation was slightly different, but I won't get into that. Herein lies the problem, because he never got another hit to the head. He never had any problem. He finished out the season. You talk to him now, he'll tell you he wasn't right. You talk to him then, he'll tell you, I'm playing. You talk to the players in the locker room, they say, you're passing every test. He's going out and skating, having no issues whatsoever, okay? So here's my problem. My problem is I have to follow criteria. I have to follow criteria that's given from the NHL, from multiple different sources. We serve many masters. We have a general manager who says he's passing. How come he's not playing? We have a coach who, I don't even want to talk about that one. We have a lot of other things that go on, and there's a lot of pressure if somebody passes their test to get them back, okay? That is the problem. Now let me talk about the asterisk, because the media, I wish he was still here, but some guys are.
Now that they left.
They're hindsight's 20/20. And we've been questioned for that move. And the reason we were questioned is because they don't know the details. But they're shooting their mouths off pretty good about what they think should and shouldn't be done. And that is the problem I find with the media. It's not a matter of exposing the stories. It's not a matter of getting knowledge out to the people. I think it's brilliant for that. But when you question a decision that was made in a closed environment and extrapolate what you think the details were, and you come up with a different conclusion, it's red journalism. And I see that all the time. So I don't know what the real,
Well, as a member of the media who's still here, and I'm the only woman in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, so I feel qualified to say this. Wasn't it Thomas Jefferson who said, given the choice between a free government and a free press, he'd take a free press? So I wouldn't have such a blanket indictment of the media. Why don't you say who the person was who misrepresented your position?
I think there was multiple places. They talked about it in the New York Times and the New York Post several times.
Who?
I don't remember the articles. I just read the articles.
Okay. Witch hunt over, Lesley. Witch hunt next.
Hi, my name is Rob. I'm a freshman in the sports management program. And first of all, I'd like to thank you all for being here. And my question is, since sports is the third largest industry behind drugs and weapons, it's impossible.
That's a horrible indictment. I thought I was taking all the abuse as a former agent.
it would seem radical to get rid of sports. So when should a child begin playing sports? Obviously, it's different for every child, but when, like, around when should they begin?
I think the question is, when should they start getting hit in the head on a regular basis where their parents are sending them to do it? That's the bigger question, and that's a hard question.
Anyone have an age they wish to venture?
Well, kids should start playing sports whenever they want to play sports, but the problem we're seeing now is that children are specializing so young in a sport that they're not playing anything else or doing anything else. They're becoming a professional person in that sport when they're 7 years old. And there's something wrong with that. They're not allowed to be a kid anymore.
I feel strongly that a kid should not play football until he gets into high school. They're just, the little leagues, the parents are the coaches, and they're not professionals. They don't know how to teach the game. And they're volunteering. They're doing the best they can. But it's, I've gone through so many youth practices where I just cringe because of the things that teach. Put your head in his chest. Put your head in his chest. That's 30 years ago. Slide your head, put your head on the football, keep your head up, keep your neck up. So, I think once you get to high school, the level of coaching, increases. And I think for football, anyway, in my opinion, high school would be a great place to start.
Next.
Thank you.
I'm Ankit Bansal. I'm a medical student from Northeast Ohio, also a research associate working with Dr. Lesley Visser in the Department of Sports Medicine. Just from a medical and research standpoint, this question goes out to all physicians in the panel and anyone else who is inside. Where do you think the next step lies as far as the research itself? Like, have you heard of any, up-and-coming studies, or if you have any ideas, throw out,
I mean, anecdotally, we don't have, concussions don't have a tissue diagnosis. There's not a MRI or an X-ray that shows it. There's no definitive way to be able to tell you whether concussion, and by the way, all the grade 1, 2, and 3, that's all falling by the wayside these days. There's no way to be able to indicate the severity of a blow to the head. I think the technology that is coming forth, and some of this is being instituted by a woman named Dr. Karen Johnston, who's a neurosurgeon in Montreal, where they're beginning to get studies, like MRIs, but much more sophisticated, that can actually grade a concussion. And what it does is it allows you, at least preliminarily, to have a better handle on the severity of the injury, whether the guy was out for 10 minutes or for 2 seconds, because that doesn't necessarily add up to the severity of the blow.
Next.
Hi, my name is Jerry Monaco. I'm a physical therapist. My question is, I know it was discussed previously about some effects of concussion. Has there any research correlating any of the effects to some long-term serious issues such as maybe brain tumors, ALS, strokes?
So we know that there are long-term effects of moderate to severe traumatic brain injury. The evidence for mild traumatic brain injury or concussion, like we're talking about, is much less robust. So we can't really say for sure what the long-term effects are. What we can say, though, is that repeated concussions over and over again, those repeated blows, whether they're subconcussive events or true concussive events that cause symptoms, can lead to long-term problems down the road. And we've heard, and we see that now with chronic traumatic encephalopathy in so many of our athletes.
Also, there's also thought that it has something to do with depression. A special kind of depression, prefrontal or limbic depression, is associated with concussion as well.
So what we're doing at BU, and we actually have our first NFL patient, I picked him up from the airport last night to start a 2-day study. We have the brain bank, and we've studied the brain now of 100 athletes, 33 of whom were former NFL players. And what we're finding, it's a biased sample, but what we're finding is most of the football players who played college or pro, and some of the high school players have CTE, pathology. They didn't necessarily have symptoms. And we're trying to correlate that retrospectively with their exposure, but that's hard to do. So what we're starting now is a 3-year study to actually try to find a biomarker for the disease so we can actually diagnose it in living people and see if that correlates to their exposure, whether it's how many concussions they think they had or how many blows to the head they might have had in all the sports that they played their whole life. It's going to be a lot of hard work, but it seems like what we're seeing is a lot of people that are diagnosed with Alzheimer's in life actually have CTE. Some of the people are coming down with ALS, and there may be a connection there. But finding out there's a lot of bad things down the road. If you get hit in the head, you don't take care of your concussions, and don't really pay attention to this.
I'd like to make a quick point, though, just in general. Somebody just asked about when is a good time for a child to play sports. I know in hockey, the American model, there's no body checking until you're the age of 14. But I wanted to say, like, in spite of all the things we're talking about here, I think that sports for children is great. There are so many amazing lessons that you can learn from the discipline of playing an individual sport or the camaraderie and teamwork necessary to play a team sport. I think that obviously we recognize that there's certain directions that we need to change the direction of sports in some ways, but I can't emphasize how important and how much I owe to playing sports, not just at the professional level, just playing sports in general in my life, and how important it is, and why. That's why I don't think anybody's here trying to say don't play sports. I think what we're trying to do is, in some respects, make it as safe as possible, but I do think that it's a great experience for children and adults.
Harry, an absolutely final thought.
I certainly understand what Brendan just said, because I learned so many valuable lessons having played, and quite frankly, I'm conflicted because, you know, I'm in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I played with the New York Giants, have a Super Bowl ring, but yet I know what it's like to sustain a concussion. I've monitored myself. I'm not going to donate my brains to you, Chris, because I know what's going on with me. I started to experience symptoms while I played back in the early 80s, but also seeing many of those players who played before me go the route of dementia and Alzheimer's. You know, I know that at some point, you know, that might be a fate that might await me, but I am going to do everything that I can do to help players who've already sustained the damage. It's great to have programs for kids, but I think those individuals who've already played, they're the ones who nobody's really paying attention to, that really need to be able to live out their lives in dignity, and that's sort of where I sort of hitch my wagon. You know, I want to do as much as I can to help all of those who are having those serious neurological issues, but not able to live out their life in a quality way.
A remarkable group of people. Thank you all.